Hey listeners, Dominic here with a quick note about this week's episode. Brian was on vacation but took time out to record it on his iPhone, so the audio quality isn't as good as it's been in the past few weeks. There's also a couple editing issues, but I hope they don't take away from what I think is one of our best written episodes yet, thanks to the talent and hard work of Bethany Powers. I hope you enjoy this week's podcast despite the technical difficulties.
Welcome to episode 36 of the Rescued by Dragons fantasy podcast, Tales of the Brunch Club. My name is Brian Messmer, and I'm not only your storyteller, but the dungeon master behind the homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign this story is based on. Please join me as I tell the tale of how my players and the dice ruined and improved my perfectly laid plans. But first, a quick recap. In episode 35, the Brunch Club dramatically returned to Elnor. As a reward for bringing Calavar to the city, Solania granted them access to the Crystal Spire Library. After being warned that they should steer clear of Elnor and lay low for a week or so, the group returned to Wheaton to check on the progress of the lighthouse and recover after their latest adventure. Back at Wheaton, the group decided to commemorate Vorjan with a weather vane atop their lighthouse. Drusilla set out to create an alchemy lab in the lighthouse to brew potions. With 6 weeks left until Drusilla finishes her lab and potions, each member of the Brunch Club must decide what to do with their unexpected yet welcome time off. And now, Chapter 36, The Meaning of Magic. Of the latest adventures the Brunch Club had embraced, grieving had not been one of them. The past weeks had taught Drusilla the value of a well-brewed potion. Not only had the Brunch Club been unable to save Vorjan, they had once again faced their demise when attacked by harpies. It was only thanks to Calavar that they continued to live and breathe. With this in mind, Drusilla easily convinced the Brunch Club that an alchemy lab to brew potions would be of a great benefit to the group. After laying low for a week, as Calavar suggested, the group began to set off on their individual adventures. They came and went from the lighthouse, addressing individual agendas while on reprieve from fighting monsters and ghouls. Some, like Salis, were around a bit more, occasionally peeping into the lighthouse to monitor progress. Drusilla noted that she seemed lost in her thoughts as she came and went, carrying a heavy aura. Alora, on the other hand, disappeared for longer, setting off with her ranger gear without much explanation as to where she was headed. "I'm off to run errands," she explained to Drusilla as she shouldered her longbow. "Don't wait up for me," she called over her shoulder, striding away from the lighthouse. Diesa and Jory decided they would set off to Elnor. "And where are you two headed?" the elf called after them as they walked away from the lighthouse. "I could use some help setting up these tables." Diesa eyed the pile of building materials growing behind Drusilla. Gosh, we would, but..." Jory started. "But we're busy. Bye," Diesa finished. The two set off to Elnor, both intent on earning coin. While Jory wanted to use his time off to prove his worth, Diesa simply missed the rush of a pocket well picked. To begin, Jory and Diesa set off to the library, each endeavoring to learn more about their trades. Jory was disappointed to find little information on Chenkagia, while Diesa had more luck investigating the lost treasure of Bon Lodir. She was surprised to find the most intel from a storybook, which spoke of the treasure as if it were a long-revered fable. The tale spoke of a dwarven merchant who made his coin by selling jewelry. People would travel from far lands to purchase the wares of Dolvar White Mountain. Dolvar made a fortune and began to obsess over his treasured jewels. It was rumored that the merchant retired to an impregnable fortress he built in the mountains, which over time came to be known in Dwarvish as Bon Lodir, or the Lonely Keep in the common tongue. Conflicting records describe the defense and nature of the keep differently. In addition to the treasure of Bon Lodir, Diesa found information on the Blade of the Mountains, a gemstone-encrusted battle axe that was sharper than steel and stronger than stone, and was rumored to have been crafted by Moradin, a dwarven god. Those possessing the axe would receive immunity from affliction, disease, and resistance to cold and heat. Excited, Diesa closed the book, imagining her return home with the battle axe at her hip. Lost in her imagination, Diesa was startled back to reality by a hiccup beside her. I'm bored, Jory slurred. My Boda bag's almost empty. He looked at Diesa with puppy dog eyes. Diesa sighed. Let's go. This place is for nerds. The next morning, Diesa and Jory went to their separate ways in Elnor. Jory found a large swath of parchment scribbling, "Punch the drunk," on its surface. For the fee of 1 silver, Jory began allowing the locals to take a swing at him. Should they hit him, 2 silvers would be returned. The game was created back in his days as a pirate captive. Late at night, when the deck below the ship stank of whiskey and the barreling voices of the pirate crew took on a slur, they would insist on Jory's company to provide entertainment. Betting coins against one another, they would try, and fail, to land punches against the scrawny, inebriated halfling. Still in his geriatric disguise, passerbys would glance at his sign and eyed the drunk old halfling. "Come on," he slurred. "Don't you want to land a swing at this?" He gestured down at his body, wiggling. "Please." A gruff passerby was the first to approach him. He was an ominous half-orc, his muscles immense and his demeanor frightful. "Just to shut you up," he growled. He dropped a coin in Jory's basket. Jory smiled. "Try me," he shouted as the half-orc swung. To the onlooker, he was sure to hit, but at the last moment Jory seemed to contort, folding backwards so his hands landed on the pavement behind him, forming an arc. People passing by took pause, cheering. Slowly, a crowd began to form as more and more townspeople decided to adopt the challenge. Day after day, townspeople gathered around to watch one another attempt to hit Jory. He encountered many frustrated dwarves, several humans, elves, and others, all failing to land a punch on him. On one of Jory's final days in Elnor, he met Chad. "Sup, little dude?" Chad asked, dropping a silver into Jory's coffer. Jory retorted, "Who are you calling little?" A thwack reverberated through the crowd as Jory was knocked several feet into the air to crash down on the pavement. "Oh, sorry, little dude. Looks like I win this round." Chad could be heard apologizing as he reached a hand into Jory's coffer, claiming 2 silver pieces. He then reached over and grabbed Jory by the shirt, pulling him back up into standing position. Later that night, Diesa joined Jory at the pub. He gazed into his cup, saddened by his defeat. "Say, Diesa," he hiccuped, "you're really tough, and I just want to be tough like you guys," he sighed. Diesa eyed the halfling, taking a sip of her ale. "Can you teach me how to be tough?" he asked. Diesa spat out her drink, ale dripping down her chin. She wiped it off with the sleeve of her shirt, scowling at the halfling. "Yeah, whatever." Since visiting the library, Diesa had woken each morning feeling like someone new. Unfurling her disguise kit, she would approach each new day with a combination of paints, fabrics, and adhesives to disguise her natural appearance. Walking through the bustling streets of Elnor, Diesa would ease into the small crowd that gathered around Jory. From the back of the crowd, she could hear him, drunk and jeering, "You punch like a baby goblin!" "Today's the day," she would think to herself, approaching the front of the crowd. Every day, Diesa tried and failed under a new disguise to punch Jory, and every day her frustration grew. While it was unlike Diesa to spend money to punch her friend when she could just do it for free, the silver it cost was nothing compared to the daily income she made by slipping her fingers into the pockets of bewildered onlookers. Sitting at the pub each night, she would join Jory, and he would ask about her day, and each day she told him to mind his own damn business. Alora also made a stop in Elnor, deciding to visit the library and make a purchase she had been contemplating for some time. At the library, Laura spent several nights in search of information on the Obsidian Watch. Late one night, her eyes burning and struggling to stay awake, she was astonished to find a leather-bound book with delicately scrawled records of their whereabouts. The book detailed the quests of the adventuring group, which appeared to have been prominent about 100 years prior. Suddenly, Alora was full of energy. The book detailed the final recorded quest of the Obsidian Watch, which is comprised of a dwarven fighter named Kelgorn Killarney, a human warlock named Alexis Sinclair, a human druid named Brendan Bearclaw, and Alora Riverleaf, a wood elf ranger from the Tenoctilan jungles. Her heart racing, Alora began to read the details regarding their last recorded quest. Reports stated that 2 party members had never been seen again. One had been confirmed dead, the other, Alora, recorded missing. The Obsidian Watch had been hunting a vampire masquerading as a Drazanian noble. The mission was notably unsuccessful. Laura also spent time researching the healers described to her by Calavar and jotted their names and whereabouts down before deciding it was time to retire for the night. Energized by sleep and her recent discoveries, Alora eagerly entered a small shop the next day to inquire about their latest inventory. She quickly made a selection. "That'll be 50 gold, the shopkeeper told her, reaching out a hand. "A fair price," Alora responded. She bent down, extending her hand to the creature in front of her, allowing it to take her scent. "Come on, copper," she continued, and was soon followed by a large wolf from the shop. The following days were spent with Alora training her newest companion in the mornings and scouting together in the afternoons. Quickly, the two became a loyal pair. While scouting, they would crouch in the brush, both silent and alert. They tracked the activities of the gnolls to the northwest of the city of Wheaton. It seemed every day several groups of 5 would patrol the area, circling around what she imagined to be where they had made camp. For weeks, Laura studied their actions until she was satisfied by her intel and confident about their routines. Finally, she decided to return to the lighthouse, Copper diligently padding along by her side. Back at the lighthouse, Salis was contemplative. She was saddened by the death of Vorjan and shocked by her 2 encounters with death. The gnome couldn't help but wonder why she had been spared not once, but twice, and how to cope with her new, overwhelming powers. Perhaps hoping to return to a simpler time, Salis mindlessly gathered driftwood from the beach and began to whittle the pieces of wood down. As the hours drew on, the figure of the dragon Bahamut took form from the beechwood, forming 5 tiny wooden statues. Salis found strips of leather to string through each pendant, gifting them to the members of the Brunch Club as they came and went. Although Salis considered visiting the Great Library of Elnor, she was apprehensive. Her questions were overwhelming her, and she was nervous to trust their answers to the unwavering resolve of printed word. Instead, Salis wandered the island in quiet contemplation, occasionally visiting with Drusilla to enjoy a small meal or drink of wine on the beach. One by one, the remaining members of the Brunch Club began to return from their adventures. The last to return was Alora, who seemed energetic and confident as she strode toward the lighthouse. Her skin was dirty and hair knotted, but she was smug. To the surprise of her companions, a wolf emerged beside her, walking diligently by her side. Later that night, the Brunch Club sat around a fire, discussing their adventure. Copper sat coolly, watching the expanse of the beach, each unfamiliar sound causing her ears to perk as she kept watch for hidden dangers. The next morning, the group set out to have brunch at the Barstool and Bluefish and discuss their next move. After the group discussed their adventures, they agreed that Alora's recent intel regarding the band of gnolls to the northwest would be the best starting point for their next adventure. "Well," Jory started, turning to Alora, "you do know their exact daily schedule. What if we capture a gnoll and interrogate them? Diesa, I bet you'd lead a great interrogation." Diesa nodded in agreement, smiling to herself as she imagined interrogating one of the hideous beasts. Then, another idea struck her. "You should do it, Jory," she suggested. "You want to become tough, right?" Jory gulped, and the group laughed. "Well, I guess that's that," Drusilla stated. "Let's go capture some gnolls." Salis seemed uneasy. I have to take care of something first." Much to the group's surprise, Salis immediately excused herself, exiting the Barstool and Bluefish. Standing outside of the sunspot, Salis took a deep breath to steady herself, knocking on the door. "How unexpected," the wizard Saberhagen purred as she entered, inviting Salis to join him on the sunny bench where he lay. He yawned and stretched on the bench, wrapping his tail around his body. "What can I help you with? Are your friends on the way?" Salis shook her head. I've been doing a lot of thinking and processing. I died twice. I have all of these powers and strange spells and abilities, and I don't know where it all came from. Like, where it really came from. Saberhagen purred, allowing Salas to continue. Look, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I was wondering if you had any answers. Where did arcane magic come from? I just want some clue as to why this is all happening. I feel so lost. Like, what's the meaning of magic? The cat rolled onto his back, stretching his claws into the air. Saberhagen began slowly kneading the open air with his paws. I do enjoy coming here to sit in the sun, he mused. It's a most excellent thinking spot where I contemplate things like, why do fish taste so good, but they are so unpleasant to retrieve? Why do I find cows cute? I think about the tall trees and the short grass, and about how they aren't so different. I wonder why I am a talking cat with a human familiar. And I, too, have contemplated the meaning of magic, he continued. How did you discover magic? Salas asked, curious. Necessity, he curtly rolled from his back to his stomach. I didn't exist until magic was pushed upon me against my will. I'm thankful for it, but before that, I was just a cat, incapable of thinking about the tall trees and the short grass. I mostly just thought about getting treats from my human. Now I am acutely aware of many things. Where did it all come from, though? I used to just be a normal gnome, going about my day, and now I have all of this power, and I just don't know what to do with it. If something can't be fixed or changed, why worry about it? The cat mused. I worry because it feels like such a big responsibility, Salas responded. It is, the cat replied. Sometimes the big picture is overwhelming. Sometimes, if you break it down into detail, it can be easier to appreciate. You may be better to look at the brushwork and the canvas and the frame instead of the work of art as a whole. Can you tell me what you know? I have something for you. You might like this. Digging through her satchel, Salas presented Saberhagen with a dead morsel of fish she had gathered off the beach the day prior. She set it on the bench. With a wave of his paw, Saberhagen smacked the fish to the floor with a small thud. Thank you, that is very kind. He nudged his head against Salas's arm. Saberhagen then began to tell Salas of the origins of magic, at least as they were commonly understood. He described two beings, greater than gods, who existed in eternal disagreement. As a way to enact their frustrations and play out their desires, they created the world to use as their personal playground. They gave life to many beings to fill the land. One created beautiful creatures and plants that brought joy, while the other created calamitous beings shrouded in darkness and evil. Together, they created elves and dwarves and humans, which seemed to balance the two within them. The beings first created elves, only to find their helplessness a bore. Together, the beings breathed magic into the world in an attempt to give these helpless beings more power and control. Salas sat for several minutes in silent contemplation after Saberhagen finished his tale, savoring the warmth of the sun pouring through the windows. Thank you, she finally said. I think you've given me a lot of needed perspective on things. Salas stood up from the bench and made her way towards the door. Oh, and one more thing, my lost little gnome. Salas paused to look back at the purring cat. Your road isn't going to be all fresh fish and catnip, but you knew that already. It's much more of a journey for us to find our own happy little sunspots. But I believe in you, Salas Garrick. You'll find yours. With that, Saberhagen closed his eyes and pretended to drift off into a catnap as Salas left the sunspot. Joining her friends back at the pub, she slid into her seat. What was that all about? Alora asked of a now visibly calmer Salas. Oh, nothing. Is anyone going to eat that biscuit? Our tale will continue in episode 37. Episode 36 was written by Bethany Powers, Dominic White, and myself, Brian Messmer. The story is based upon my own homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Additional role-playing contributions to the story by Bethany Powers, who played Diesa, J.P. Black, who played Drusilla, Liz Richard, who plays Alora, Anna Flemke, who plays Salis, and Dominic White, who plays Jory. Ambience and effects used with permission by Michael Gelfi. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us out by sharing it with your friends and rating and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. We really appreciate it. More information about Rescued by Dragons and ways to support this podcast can be found at rescuedbydragons.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Rescued by Dragons, on Twitter, Rescue Dragons, and on YouTube under Rescued by Dragons. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week to see what my players' choices and the roll of the dice have in store.
First male wolf they're gonna run into, Copper's gonna be like, wolf is wolf.
That's my girl. Future breeding opportunities. Just like start a business.
Oh, this is our next downtime activity.